Welcome to the BarBend podcast, where we talk to top athletes, coaches, influencers, and minds from around the world of strength sports. Presented by BarBend.com. Today on the BarBend podcast, I'm talking to Bryce Krawczyk, the owner and head coach at Calgary Barbell, a company dedicated to coaching services as well as educational and entertainment content via YouTube and Instagram. He's an IPF Classic World Medalist, Canadian National Champion, and IPF Open World Record holder. He's also a BarBend.com contributor and the subject of a great new documentary titled The Powerlifter. If you haven't seen Bryce and Calgary Barbell's content before, it's truly top-notch. Their series titled So You Want to Be a Powerlifter was a hit on multiple platforms, including their YouTube channel and a written series on BarBend. Bryce makes powerlifting fun, funny, and accessible to just about anyone, and I'm excited to dive into what motivates him both as an athlete and an influencer in the sport. And just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the BarBend podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review in your podcast app of choice. This helps us stay on track in bringing you the best content possible week after week. And if there's someone you'd absolutely love to hear on a future BarBend podcast episode, let us know in your podcast review. I personally read each and every review, so your suggestions will be seen. All right, today on the BarBend podcast, I'm talking to someone who I've been following in the sport of powerlifting for a number of years. I've been fortunate enough to work with him on a few pieces of content for BarBend, and that is record-holding powerlifter Bryce Krawczyk. Bryce, thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
Absolutely. I'm very, very happy to be here. I know we've had the opportunity to collaborate on a couple of things, and it's cool to have the opportunity to be in one of your inaugural episodes. I'm excited about it.
Well, we are definitely early on in the podcast recording process, but so far we've had a pretty diverse array of folks, and I believe you're our second or third powerlifter. Everyone's been a world record holder at some point so far. Wow. So you're joining rarefied air, but
clearly,
just to kick off, Bryce, I mean, a lot of people know you as a record-holding powerlifter, a content creator, the face behind Calgary Barbell. How did you get started in powerlifting, and when was that?
So for me, powerlifting was I kind of fell in love with just going to the gym and lifting and some of that kind of sort of just basic, doing the damn thing early on as a function of just being unhappy with being a skinny guy. I was naturally scrawny. I was always, had a very slight frame. I think I was looking back at an old training journal not long ago and seeing myself kind of writing a celebration of hitting 160 pounds body weight. So it started off as one of those things to try to, I guess, just be a bit more comfortable in the skin that I live in, and quickly kind of realized just how much I liked to lift and how much I, enjoyed the process of getting better at things. So decided to try my hand at competing in something related to that. The bodybuilding for me just never appealed to me. It just didn't, check those boxes for me for a number of reasons. But my boss at the time was actually a bodybuilder. I was working for like a small personal training company. And he did some powerlifting in his off season and said, well, why don't you come try a powerlifting meet? So I went to my first powerlifting meet in 2012. And it was like one of those light bulb moments. It just clicked, and I was like, "Well, this is my thing." I mean, I had never felt that way. Even coming off the platform for my first squat, I had never had that kind of a rush before in my life, and it just immediately sunk in that this was something I was going to do a lot of.
All right, that first meet back in 2012. What body weight were you competing at, and do you remember what your lifts were?
So I competed at 181 or 183. I think it was the 83 kilo category. I think my squat was about 190 kilos. Bench was somewhere in like the 130 range. And my deadlift was I want to say it was just over 500 pounds. So like 230, 240 kilos.
And just to give folks a reference point as to where you are now in body weight and numbers, we're here in 2019, summer of 2019. What are you competing at? And, what are your best competition lifts right as of now?
So I compete at 105, currently in the process of moving up a weight class. So I'm a little bit heavier than that right now.
105 kilos, just to clarify there.
Kilos, yeah. So 231 pounds. And my best lifts in competition are a 315 kilo squat. So I think that's 694 pounds, 182.5 kilo bench, which is 403 or 402 maybe, and a 375 kilo deadlift, which is, I want to say like 840, 830, somewhere in there.
I mean, what's the difference? What's 10 pounds when you're deadlifting over 800, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It makes the difference between, standing up and not.
I promise I was being sarcastic there. So Bryce, you compete back in 2012, your first one. You get a rush coming off the platform.
Absolutely.
Did that like just open the floodgates and you just wanted to turn around and compete again?
To a point, yeah. Like it gave me enough to continue on with things. I did my second meet and I actually bombed on my second meet on the squat. I got called for depth on my first one, made some poor decisions on my second and third, and didn't end up getting a squat in. But stuck with it a little bit. And after I moved to Calgary in Alberta, the big one that kind of opened the floodgates was the first time I ever went head to head with somebody. It was for the provincial title. And it came down to the last deadlift. It was very, very heated back and forth. And that was, I think I fell in love on an even deeper level with that kind of competition within the sport, because it was the first time I had experienced that. I did win. So there were a lot of things there that just, really opened the floodgates. Up to that point, it was cool and I really enjoyed it. After that, it was like, okay, this is my life now.
I have to say, provincial title sounds so much cooler than the American equivalent, which is state champion, which is still a great accomplishment. But just saying you're like I'm the provincial title holder. It just got such swagger to it.
Well, maybe it's because there's many, a number less provinces than there are states. Who knows?
How many times have you been the provincial title holder in Alberta?
Maybe 2 or 3 times. I generally, when provincials come around, I referee because we have to participate in Alberta. We have to participate in our provincials in order to go to nationals. And most of the time I choose not to lift at provincials and sort of use my competition schedule or tailor my competition schedule to the bigger meets at this point. But yeah, so maybe 2 or 3 times I won provincials. Gotcha.
Now, something you're really known for online, and it shows through in a lot of content you produce. We've worked on some of this together for BarBend and some of the content Calgary Barbell puts out there, is really shining a light on the difference between raw and equipped powerlifting, some of the misconceptions folks have. So how did your evolution in the sport come about when it came to, transitioning from raw and then starting equipped powerlifting, basically?
Okay. So I think the big thing for me, and honestly, there was a real sort of tipping point with that as well. I had seen equipped lifting, and it looked kind of cool. And the sort of prevailing mindset or prevailing, school of training at the time when I first got into powerlifting in regards to equipped lifting was the sort of West Side multiply, super wide stance, super high squat, monolifted. It was a very different kind of lifting and a very different, attitude towards things. And then at the time, I think equipped lifting in the IPF was very, or at least in this part of Canada, was very, very minimal. So I was exposed to a little bit of that, thought it was kind of cool, and went and presented at a coaching conference alongside some really great coaches. And one of the coaches' presentations was, "Hey guys, this is what equipped lifting is." And it was at that point that I kind of thought, hey, I wonder if that would be something I wouldn't like to try. And kind of got into it and just immediately fell in love with it again. That was sort of in the midst of some hip injury issues that I have been dealing with on and off for a number of years. And being in the equipment, I had no pain. So that was another big draw to it for me, as well as just, it was another thing that I could get good at a very, very quick pace. One of the things that I think drew me into lifting when I first started was that I saw so much progress. It was very exciting to see myself progress at that rate and really addicting, I think, in some ways. So getting into equipment was another learning curve. I was a novice at it. I didn't know how to use the equipment. I couldn't use the tight stuff. It was an opportunity for me to find something else within the sport that allowed me to push that much further and get that much further.
I've heard a few other athletes talk about this. Blaine Sumner is one that comes to mind. I mean, he really made his name as a raw power lifter, and now he's one of the finest equipped power lifters in the world, or at least definitely one of the best well known as well. And he talks about equipped powerlifting as a mechanism to extend his training career and extend his competing career as well. Do you find some personal validity to that?
I think so. Like I said, I know for me that I'd say 99% of the time, if I'm in a squat suit, I don't get the usual hip pain that I have to kind of be cautious with and lift in such a way and be very conscious of my intensities like I do when I'm raw. So for me, it's the ability to kind of go out there and really, just push hard and not have to worry about some of those other things. And I think being able to push in that movement, there's enough literature about the sort of psychological impact on pain and these kinds of things. So being able to squat heavy and hard and really push myself, even with the use of a suit, I think has aided me in being able to stay training raw and do a better job of that training, push harder, and hopefully, compete for longer. So I definitely think there's some merit to that idea.
I know this is something you get asked a lot, and I'll definitely tell people at the end of this podcast and put it in the show notes to check out all the awesome content Calgary Barbell has on the subject. But what are some misconceptions you think a lot of powerlifters, a lot of people in strength training and even raw powerlifters might still have today when it comes to equipped lifting and what that really means?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's easy. That you put on this suit and, miraculously, and all of a sudden you can just use it like an expert and get, 100 kilos or 200 pounds on your squat. That you just get into this thing and, hey, everything's easier. And it's so far from that. Like it's a whole other learning curve. It takes you a long time to be able to use this stuff that is going to give you the benefits of being able to add that much. So it's a very much like a scaling sort of ladder of, okay, skills improved. So now I can get into tighter equipment, and then your skill increases, and then you can get into tighter equipment. But it's definitely not an easy thing.
Gotcha. Now I do want to take a different perspective here, because you're not just a competitive and record holding powerlifter. You're a content creator. You're a coach. Calgary Barbell puts out what I think is some of the best content in powerlifting, especially on the video side. How did you come to get involved in so many aspects of the sport, not just competing?
So I think the content creation and stuff like that, I mean, when I first began powerlifting, I was doing personal training. So it just kind of logically followed that as I became a better lifter and educated myself further in the sort of, in the sport, I was able to begin coaching powerlifters at a, sort of more novice level and help introducing people to it. And as my skill as a coach grew, I worked with more and more advanced clients. So that kind of just logically followed. But in terms of the content creation, that was all just meeting Dylan by chance, really. And Dylan Yakovets is my business partner and the guy behind the camera for all of the Calgary Barbell content. And we kind of lifted together, and he was doing some vlogging and decided that his vlog content wasn't what he wanted to be doing. He thought that he had a really good grasp on sort of the behind the camera stuff, but with him as the subject, he felt like it was falling short in some ways. So we decided to just make some promotional stuff and some really quick videos that very quickly turned into, okay, well, we can make, an actual go at this and try to, produce more and more content. And it, again, kind of just caught on and snowballed from there. But that stuff's all Dylan, man.
What is Dylan's background, and how did you all get linked up? You were training partners first?
Yeah. So he trained with another guy who just goes by Friggy.
That's the most Canadian powerlifting name I've ever heard. Friggy. What weight class is Friggy? Is he a super heavy?
Friggy was a 120.
Okay.
I think he dabbled in the super heavies more than once, but usually competed around 120. So anyways, Friggy and Dylan had some classes together, and Friggy and I got chatting one day in the hallway because I was wearing an Elite FTS sweater or something like that. Anyways, we ended up training together for a while and getting to talking, and it kind of just developed from there. Dylan has a kinesiology degree, and I think wanted to get into whether physical therapy, I think was sort of his end goal, but ended up taking an elective which required him to do a film project. And again, it was one of those things that just like something just clicked for him. And he decided that was what he wanted to do, and then was able to kind of make that connection between his kinesiology background and lifting and film through us creating Calgary Barbell.
Now let's talk about that. Now, Calgary Barbell, what is it? It's not just a YouTube. It's not just a YouTube channel. You're very much the face of it. But if folks want to understand, what is Calgary Barbell? What are all the services you offer for the powerlifting community? What's the elevator pitch there?
So the first and foremost, we're a coaching company. So it's myself. I have 4 other coaches employed that we do personal training and one-on-one coaching, small group coaching, as well as a great deal of online coaching. Secondly, it's education. So we do a lot of seminars and education on sort of a novice and more advanced level, depending on the audience and that kind of thing. And then lastly, that sort of education branches into what we try to do with the YouTube content. We also, we sell some apparel, and we're working currently on a program library that people can purchase programs from that will allow them a taste of sort of what we offer in online coaching.
Awesome. You all have some fantastic video series on YouTube. The one that we've worked together on the BarBend and Calgary Barbell side is So You Want to Be a Powerlifter, where you break down all these steps. And I'm sure that's a lot of content that you would have really liked maybe when you were first starting your powerlifting career. Where do the topic ideas come from? Are these questions that people are reaching out to you about? Are these questions that maybe your training clients have? How are you coming up with these ideas?
I think the biggest thing there, and you kind of nailed it right there, was it was the things that I wish I would have known going into a powerlifting meet. And then it, kind of branches into some of the things that I thought were more advanced things that maybe, it would be good to be conscious of these things, but it's not necessarily, 100% necessary for you to know all of it. But I showed up to my first powerlifting meet, and I had to revamp my bench press in the warm-up room because I didn't know that your head had to be down on the bench. I didn't know you had to wrap your thumbs around the bar, and I didn't know that your heels had to be down. So as I'm warming up, people are looking at me like, you can't do this on the platform, dude. Like, that's not okay. So through that and through also taking a lot of lifters to their first meets as a coach, and sort of running through the gamut of, okay, these are the rules, these are the calls, these are what the lights mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just thought that would be a good sort of resource to direct people to, and say, here, take an hour out of your day and watch them all, or take 20 minutes a day for a week out of your life to kind of go through this, and then and you can ask me to sort of touch on some of the finer points or whatever. But I thought that was something that would have a lot of value for a lot of people, because the sport is growing at such a rapid rate. There's a lot of first-time lifters. On the coach and the referee side of things, it's good when people come in and they're like, yeah, no, I know that. I got my rack heights. I have my opening attempts in kilos, and the numbers all make sense. I'm not trying to open with 51 kilos or anything like that. But so yeah, it's just an attempt at helping to provide people with something that can leave them a bit more well-versed for their first trip to the platform.
Something that you've touched on in your videos, and actually in conversations we've had just, over email or over the phone, is advice you have for first-time competitors, especially those who might not have the luxury of having such an experienced coach like you in their corner. What are some of the main tips you might give to folks who are into powerlifting, thinking about competing, but maybe they don't have a coach yet? Maybe they're thinking, I shouldn't compete. I don't have this whole support team behind me. If someone's going at it alone at that first competition, your top 3 tips you might give them.
So number 1, I would say try to be a bit social. A lot of times, if you can make a connection with somebody and, be friendly, they can help guide you in some ways. Maybe their coach will help you sling plates in the warm-up room. I know I've done it for people who are like, hey man, can I work in on that rack? And then, they have a couple of very sort of novice questions and things like that. And it's like, okay, we'll kind of take you under our wing today. We'll give you a bit of a hand, because I find the powerlifting community is really, really great in that way. A lot of people are very willing to help out. Number 2 would be, don't worry about your weight class. That's a huge, huge one. People are, should I cut 10 kilos for my first meet, so I'm more competitive. And it's like, no, dude, just like eat and drink as normal, go in and compete as somewhere right in the middle of a weight class. You're not trying to maximize your lean tissue at that point. Like just go lift and don't do that to yourself. And lastly would be, I guess, try to familiarize yourself with the rule book, at least to some extent. Take the time to understand how the meet's going to run, what you're going to get called for, or hopefully not get called for, and how, the order of things will go and what the referees do and who to ask about what. And, so yeah, that'd probably be the big one, or the big three there.
Well, you forgot the most important one, which is come prepped with a powerlifting nickname. Friggy's already taken, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, if you got one of those, put it in quotation marks and try to get that on your lifter card so it shows up on the screen every time.
So Bryce powerlifting in 2012, Bryce powerlifting now in 2019. You've changed a lot. You've grown a lot. How do you think the sport has changed and grown in that time period?
One of the cool anecdotes that I often go back to when I reminisce about the olden days, and I'm not that veteran in the sport. I understand that there's a lot of people who have been doing this for 30 or 40 years, but in the time that I've seen, one of the big things is just the number of lifters at a meet and the number of people interested. My second meet I talked about bombing out of, that was Western Championships. Now there was no qualifying total. There were maybe 12 or 13 lifters, I think, total. There were probably 2 female competitors. And you go to a meet now and it's, Western Canadians, I think is coming up here in September. There's probably 500 or 600 lifters. And I would be very surprised if we weren't 50 or even 60% female lifters. So those are probably the 2 biggest changes, or simply the number of people and the number of female competitors has greatly increased, which I think are fantastic markers for progress in the sport.
How do you think all the different infrastructures behind powerlifting, whether it's gyms, gym owners, federations, where have you seen them succeed in keeping up with that growth, and where do you think there's still a lot of gaps?
I can speak maybe more to the gym side of things, because I've been involved with our gym here in Calgary since its inception. And I think a lot of people as gym owners, there are two big mistakes. So number one, they try to start too big. They try to take on this gigantic facility, outfit it with all comp spec equipment, and, create this sort of huge initial investment and overhead that isn't sustained if you don't have a community. So I think that as a gym owner or a prospective gym owner, definitely focus on the community first. And secondly, I think I forget where I was going to go with that one. That first one's a big one. Maybe I covered it.
The
second concept there. But
the second concept is rewind this podcast by a minute, listen to that first one again, because it's pretty important.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest one. It's just, your sort of eyes are bigger than your stomach kind of thing.
Now, I want to shift a little bit, because something that some listeners might have seen, and something that I hope all the listeners to this podcast will check out after this, and we wrote about it on BarBend.com, is the documentary that you're the star of, The Powerlifter. A fantastic documentary, goes really deep into your process, your competition preparation, you as an athlete. How did that come about? And, ultimately, what's it like watching a representation of yourself as an athlete on screen in that kind of big format?
So it came about, Dylan has, like I said, been involved in film and kind of has his ear to the ground, has a couple of friends in the industry, or at least in, art schools and that kind of stuff. So we found out about this Story Hive grant that TELUS does. And they give out a whole bunch of money to, I think it was 20 different entries, and they do different styles. So this one was documentary. They have one for music video. They have one for web series, etc. And we signed up. We tried to, we entered for this documentary one, and there were a number selected by panel of judges, a number selected by popular vote. And we were lucky enough to have enough influence that we could, pester people enough that they would go and vote for us every day, sometimes on all the different devices. And people were awesome in terms of the support for the thing. So we ended up winning by popular vote, and we got a grant. We were able to get some pretty fantastic equipment, because Dylan's obviously very well versed at kind of doing the whole process himself. We didn't really need to hire much for outside help or a team or anything like that. And yeah, I mean, in terms of what it's like, I felt a little like vulnerable sometimes in some situations, putting some of that stuff out there. And just a bit unsure like how it was going to be received, right? Like my process is not everybody's process. My feelings toward powerlifting and the way that it integrates to my life is not the same as everybody else's. So our big hopes with the film were to try to, for one, I guess, explain what powerlifting means to me and try to put into words why I think people are drawn to the sport. And as a second part, I guess, try to explain that previous concept to people who look at us like we're insane and like, why would you want to do that? You know, to kind of explain, hey, this is why we love this. This is why we pursue this. This is why, you know, we're willing to injure ourselves and go through setbacks and things like this for this sport. So our kind of goal is that people who maybe aren't lifters and don't get lifting can watch that and be like, oh, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense.
What's some of the feedback been from maybe folks inside the powerlifting community and also your friends and family who are not necessarily super entrenched in powerlifting or the strength sports community? I would say 95%, 99% of the feedback from the powerlifting community has been outstanding. It was pretty incredible to hear all of the feedback and all of the people who were able to identify with what we said. And, you know, things like, you know, this is why I lift, but I've never been able to put it into words before. And things like that, which really made me feel good. And like we kind of accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. I also talked to a lot of lifters who forced their non-lifting friends to watch it. And even then, you know, they said that it was pretty well received. So I guess, you know, we've accomplished some of the things we set out to try to accomplish with that. Would you, if presented with the opportunity, would you do another documentary that like semi-invasive, up close and personal look inside your life, or are you good for a bit on that?
I think we're actually mulling about the idea of doing something maybe not more personal, but maybe more general, trying to talk to more lifters and talk to sort of budding powerlifting communities and figure out, you know, why different people powerlift and get more perspective and try to, I guess, understand other different ways of looking at the sport, as well as continue to follow as I guess work towards the World Games in a couple of years. So something longer form and maybe a bit broader, but yeah, that might be in the works. Who knows?
That's who knows? Well, you might, but not leaking too much right now. Right. World Games. That's a great segue. What does your training look like these days? What are your immediate, midterm, and longer term goals for yourself in the sport?
So currently, training is kind of the calm before the storm. Heading into Worlds in November, I'll be competing in Dubai at the IPF Open World Championships. So I'm in like a maintenance block, doing some hypertrophy work. Things are light. Things are a lot of sets of 12 and those kinds of things.
Rough.
Just finished a really productive raw block, which is really encouraging. I feel like if I can get my raw strength up, my equipped lifts are just going to be better. And I'm pretty excited to get back to it at this point. So training has been going really well. The hip hasn't been giving me many issues, and trying to, I guess, maintain perspective on, you know, the long term, being that 2020 Worlds means more than this Worlds, and pace myself a little bit and some of that kind of stuff.
So let's talk about, you know, next year, the year after that. You talked about the World Games preparation for that. Just for folks who might not be super familiar with the international powerlifting calendar, what does that look like for you, and how does that influence your long-term goals?
So World Games is sort of the end of the tunnel for me at this point. We'll see what happens after that. But World Games is a multi-sport event. It's the pinnacle of powerlifting right now. They take the I believe you have to hit the podium at Open Worlds the previous year, or there are some wild card slots based on how you perform at other international meets that are available for certain countries. But it's the best of the best. They trim the weight classes down to, I think, like light, middleweight, and heavy, and just, you know, whoever lifts the most, or I think they might go by IPF points. I'm not entirely sure, but So it's the elite of the elite, and that's my big goal right now. So,
and it's a bit like, powerlifting's not an Olympic sport yet, as of this recording. But it's, the World Games isn't an every year sort of thing, just to give folks at home a perspective.
Yeah. So it's essentially the sports that are waiting to or trying to get into the Olympics. It's recognized by the IOC, which I'm not exactly sure what that means as an event. But so there are a lot of different sports that are kind of vying for Olympic hopeful, or they are Olympic hopefuls, I guess.
And this is sort of like it's every 4 years, right? The World Games.
Yeah, every 4 years.
So it's a bit like the testing grounds there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I might have 2 shots at this if I have a nice long career, but beyond that, I don't know if I have another 12 years of being this competitive in me. So we'll see.
Well, Bryce, as we're coming toward the end of this recording, where can folks follow along with you, with Calgary Barbell, the awesome content you all are putting out, and if they're interested in learning more about your training and just your approach, where can they find that info online?
So we are Calgary Barbell literally everywhere. We are Calgary Barbell on YouTube, Instagram, we're Calgary Barbell. My personal account is Bryce_CBB. I post a lot more of my training on there. We try to put more educational sort of coach content on the Calgary Barbell Instagram. We're on Facebook, despite not posting there too much. And we do actually do some Twitch live streaming now. We do live form checks and have our viewers send in videos. We analyze them, and it's pretty cool. We do that like once a week. So it's a couple different ways you can get in touch with us.
Awesome. Well, Bryce, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. I know it's busy between training, coaching, and managing all the other aspects of your business. So really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.